Greetings and welcome, everyone. My name is Lokita Maka. Thank you so much for joining me. If you are new to this channel, please press that subscribe button and subscribe. If you're a returning subscriber, thank you so much once again for your continued support. So today I want us to look at the research process. So you've been wondering, where do I go about with this research of mine? I want to conduct a research, but I just don't know where to start. So this is basically what we'll be doing today. So, firstly, let's look at the word research. So, this word has got a prefix re, which means again, and the suffix search, which basically means trying to find something by looking or otherwise seeking carefully and thoroughly. So basically, research is the systematic investigation into and study of materials and sources in order to establish facts and reach new conclusions. So, for the outline of our session, we'll look at identifying the problem, creating a hypothesis or formulating a hypothesis, reviewing related literature, research design, data collection and analysis, interpretation, as well as report writing. So the research process is not necessarily a linear process where you have to complete one step before moving on to the next. So you don't have to complete step one in order to move to step two or step three. Some of these steps can be completed simultaneously. However, some of them you may need to complete other steps before you start with them. Right. So, for instance, you cannot analyze your data if you haven't collected data or you haven't gathered your data, and you cannot interpret the data if you haven't collected and analyzed. But you can start with your report writing if you have formulated a problem, if you have formulated your hypothesis, if you have done your literature review. And at the same time, you can start with literature review before you formulate your hypothesis, or you can collect data before you do your literature review. So this is basically not a linear process. So it will be up to you. You will also decide as a student or as a person who's conducting the data, on how you go about it as we go through. So in just few minutes, we will be discussing these few steps. And yeah, let's start with the first one. So identifying the problem, identifying the research problem, defining the problem. So what is your research all about? That is the question you should be asking yourself. What are you doing here? What are you discussing? Which problem do you want to solve? Now this comes from your interest as a person, and also the availability of funds can be one of the things that may influence the problem. And also, what is it that you want to contribute? What is the significance of the study? Is it economical? Is it social? Those are the things that you need to look at. Now, when you are identifying this problem, you may need to ask yourself a lot of questions. You may need to consult people. You may need to read sources. Go online and see if is this problem actually something that hasn't been done. Is this really a problem? So I think that is one of the important things that you need to ask yourself. Is what you solve really a problem? Where is the problem? Where is the actual problem? Now this is where you find gaps. Now, going online, reading sources, going to people, trying to find out, this will actually tell you or help you to define your research problem. Now, a good research will always start with a good problem. So you have to observe things. You'll have to have prior knowledge of what you are trying to solve, basically. Then now you may, after you have defined or identified your problem, your research problem, you may need to formulate a hypothesis. Now, formulating your own hypothesis, basically, you are answering or you are asked, yes, basically, that it's a statement where you're trying now to solve this problem. So don't be afraid if your hypothesis is proven incorrect at the end of the research. Some people may not formulate the hypothesis per se, but they may have research questions and research objectives. What are you trying to find out? Now, what are the questions that you are asking in order to answer or to define your overall research problem, right? How do you solve this problem? That is basically it. Then, review of literature. Now, when you have identified your problem, this may be vague. So you need to go out there. This is where the word research comes in. Now, you are reviewing related literature, publications, internet sources. You go out there, read what other authors have said, things that are in line with your problem, with your research problem. You review that literature, you acknowledge those sources or those authors, because you are not the first one to do something in line with this. So you need to now trim your problem, find relevant literature, find people who have also talked about this content that you are coming with, so that they can be able to support you. This is basically you supporting yourself. How do you use literature in order to support your research? So that is the next question. Third question that you may want to ask yourself: how do you use literature in order to support your research? And then the next thing is creating a research design. So this is basically a blueprint of your research. So this is the work plan, not only because it entails the resources needed in conducting this research, but also the ways these resources will be utilized. How are you going to go about your research? This is basically the methodology. How are you going to collect data? Which research are you going to do? Is it qualitative? Is it quantitative? But we will discuss that later. So this is basically a work plan of your study, right? Then the next thing now is collecting data. So now this is you doing the actual experiment if you're conducting an experiment. This is you going out and do interviews, do focus groups if you have to do that. This is you getting secondary data if you will be using secondary data that has been collected already. So this is basically you finding the raw material, the raw facts that has not yet been processed. Or even if some have been processed, but they have not been processed by you, they're not answering to your research problem. So that's what data collection is all about. Then after now you have received the data, you have to analyze the data. Then after you have analyzed, you have to interpret now this data. This is where your results come in. This is where the discussion comes in. This is the heart of the research process, basically, because it is the part where now your problem or your questions, your research questions are being answered. This is where your hypothesis is being proven, whether is it correct or it's not. And again, as I have said, if your hypothesis is proven not to be correct, then you don't have to feel bad about that. You don't have to feel bad about that, but you have to record what you have found. And that would be interesting for future research. Right. And then after that, you'll have to do conclusions and recommendations. So now when we're talking about the conclusion, this is where you present the solution. to the proposed problem, right? This is based on the findings of your study, on your findings of your investigation. Now, when you were creating the research questions earlier or formulating your hypothesis, now you have to answer those. You have to answer those questions based on the findings of your investigation. And you make recommendations after that, because that is basically the reason why you were conducting that research. You want to solve a problem. And now, how do we solve this problem? You recommend. What do you think needs to be done based on what you have found? So, yes, thank you very much. Basically, that's it in few minutes. Thank you so much for joining me. Once again, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to the channel. If you're a returning subscriber again, thank you so much. See you next time.